Thinking back over your life, can you remember some situations where you were treated unfairly, blamed for something you didn't do, wronged by a person or a company or a business, insulted by a friend or a family member, lied about and your reputation tarnished? Were you ever passed over for a position that you should have had, one that you were suited for, one that you worked for, one that should have been yours, but it was given to someone who was not as deserving? Have you ever been left out or excluded purposely by a group of people? Have you ever been dismissed because of your looks or your dress or your ethnicity or your socioeconomic level? Have you ever felt wronged or ignored by someone who is proud or powerful? I may not know you, but I know this about you, that you have been treated unfairly at some point in your life, because we have all been there. Welcome to another teaching from In Favor Resources on how to increase our faith. We are enlarging our capacity and our ability to trust God and trust in His power in every area of our life. And this is number 18, and it's a series within a series because we're talking about holding on to our faith, pushing back against those circumstances that would rob us of our faith in God. So I'm asking you to pause right now before we go any farther and download the handout that goes with number 18 in this series at infavorresources.com. When you push the button for this video, there should have been a little link there at the bottom. It says handout. Press that because there are some scriptures here, some quotes, and some lyrics and other things that you'll want to keep long after you've forgotten or watched this video. So, I'm assuming you've done that. You're ready to go. This is number 18, holding on to our faith when it's unfair. Now your handout begins with the NIV translation of Proverbs 20:22, which says this: "Do not say, 'I'll pay you back for this wrong.' Wait for the Lord, and He will avenge you." Now this wise saying from Proverbs assures us of several things. First of all, it tells us that you can be sure that you will be the recipient of unfair treatment at some point in your life, because it says, for this wrong, don't pay them back for this wrong that was done to you, that has happened to you. They'll come. You can count on it. Number two, we don't have to respond to that unfairness in kind. We don't have to do that because the proverb says, do not say, "I'll pay you back." That's a command. And God never gives us a command that we're not able to obey. It's a choice that we make. Number three, we can choose to be patient with God and wait for His timing. So the proverb said, wait for the Lord. And then number four, most importantly, we learn from this proverb that God will make the wrong things right. It says, He will avenge you. So here are some other takes on this verse. The Message says, don't ever say, "I'll get you for that." Wait for God. He'll settle the score. The New Living Translation says, don't say, "I will get even for this wrong." Wait for the Lord to handle the matter. And the Passion, this is the final one there on your handout. Don't ever say, "I'm going to get even with them if it's the last thing I do." Wrap God's grace around your heart, and He will be the one to vindicate you. Now, the principles in the Bibles are all great, and they sound good, but it's even better when you can find a person who illustrates those principles, who in their life showed that God comes through. And so out of the many examples, a great actual flesh and blood example in Scripture about this principle is Joseph in Genesis 37 through 50. Although he is repeatedly wronged, Joseph patiently served the Lord, and God rewarded him greatly. So I am going to just summarize the high points and low points in the life of Joseph here. This isn't on your handout, but this is Genesis 37 through 50. And in just a minute or two, I'm going to give you the quick version of his life. So at 17, Joseph was his father's favorite, and his brothers knew, and they hated him for it. He had 2 self-exalting prophetic dreams, and his brothers were jealous, and his father even rebuked him. His brothers plotted to kill him, but instead sold him as a slave to some traveling merchants. And Joseph was sold again to Egypt to Potiphar, who was the captain of Pharaoh's guards. And the Lord was with him there, and he prospered. He worked hard, and he was rewarded for it. Potiphar entrusted to him all that he owned, but when he refused the advances of Potiphar's wife, she lied and wrongly accused Joseph. Angry at him, instead of his wife, Potiphar had Joseph incarcerated in the prison with all the king's prisoners. And the Lord was with him in prison, in this unfair situation, and gave him favor, and the warden put him in charge. So Joseph interprets a dream, and he asks the king's cupbearer to remember him when he is released. But when the cupbearer is released, he forgets all about Joseph, who stays in prison in a place that he doesn't belong for something he didn't even do. When Joseph has a dream, when Pharaoh has a dream, the cupbearer remembers Joseph. And so he is brought to the palace, not knowing what's going on. They'd have come to his cell, they'd have shaved his head, cleaned him up, washed him, perfumed him, put a robe on him. He had no idea what was happening. He probably thought this might be the end. But instead, he's taken into the presence of Pharaoh. And Joseph interprets the dream and advises Pharaoh to put a discerning and wise man in charge. He wasn't applying for the job. He was just giving Pharaoh the best advice that he could. And Pharaoh agrees. He puts Joseph in charge of the whole land of Egypt, and Joseph is a wise steward. He doesn't let this power and glory go to his head. He was a wise steward during his 7 years of famine, and he stored up huge quantities of grain. And because the famine was so severe, all the world came to Egypt to buy grain from Joseph. And when Jacob, this is Joseph's father, learned that there was grain in Egypt, he sent Joseph's brothers, his sons, to Egypt to buy some. Well, Joseph immediately recognizes them, but they have no idea who this very glorious and rich and powerful person is in this other country. They have no idea this is their brother. He looks completely differently. Well, after heart-rending episodes and mysterious coincidences, Joseph reveals himself to his brothers, and they are left speechless, and they are terrified at his presence. And Joseph reassures them that he's not going to punish them for their unfair treatment of him. God tells Jacob to go to Egypt and that he will make Jacob's family into a great nation there. So Joseph continues to prosper in Egypt, collecting a great deal of money, livestock, and property for the king. When Jacob dies, Joseph's brothers are fearful that he will now seek his revenge. Joseph explains to them, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good." Genesis 50:20. Again, you intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. I want you to write these down on the blanks in your handout. Because Joseph trusted God's purposes for his life. Because Joseph trusted God's purposes for his life, in other words, he believed in his prophetic promises, and he faithfully worked as to the Lord wherever he landed, he was able to withstand the hardships. His brother's treachery, unfair. Mrs. Potiphar's lies and accusations, totally unfair. And the cupbearer's selfish neglect, unfair. And finally, and he was able to forgive those who had wronged him. Because Joseph trusted God's purposes, he was able to withstand the hardships and forgive those who had wronged him. He even gave God the glory and acknowledged how it was the Lord who had put him in this place so that he could do so much good. Joseph did not say, "I'll pay you back for this wrong," but he waited for the Lord, and God avenged him. Proverbs 20:22 is no empty promise. It's not wishful thinking. God moved heaven and earth to put Joseph in the most powerful position in Egypt to save his family, the nation of Israel. And he did it through unfair situations. Israel, the Jewish people, they exist today because of Joseph. Because unfair situations were the stepping stones that put him into the place of prominence and power. This passage from the Psalms could have been Joseph's testimony. Now, it wasn't, because he never even saw these words. But man, if he read them today, he'd say, well, yeah, that's me. Psalms 37:1 and following. Do not fret because of those who are evil, or be envious of those who do wrong. For like grass, they will soon wither. Like green plants, they will soon die away. Trust in the Lord and do good. Dwell in the land and enjoy safe pasture. Verse 4, take delight in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. Commit your way to the Lord. Trust in him, and he will do this. Verse 6, he will make your righteous reward shine like the dawn. Your vindication, if you're in an unfair situation right now, remember this, your vindication will be like the noonday sun. Be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him. This is the hard part. Do not fret when people succeed in their ways, when they carry out their wicked schemes. Refrain from anger and turn from wrath. Do not fret, it leads only to evil. For those who are evil will be destroyed. Those who hope in the Lord will inherit the land. A little while and the wicked will be no more. Though you look for them, they will not be found. But the meek will inherit the land and enjoy peace and prosperity. In other words, if you will trust me, God says, if you will hold on to your faith, I will take care of everything and everyone else. Just trust me and wait. So here are a couple quotes on your handout for pressing into this principle. Cindy McMenamin asked this, where is God when life seems unfair? You may feel that you are living simply, skimping and barely getting by, while someone else who seems to have no regard for God is living high on the hog. But God sees your heart. And if you are truly bent on being obedient to him, even during tough times, when things don't seem fair, he will raise you up at the right time. 1 Peter 5:6 tells us, humble yourselves, therefore, under God's mighty hand, that he may lift you up in due time, and cast all your anxiety on him, because he cares for you. And did you catch when God will lift us up? In due time. There's a timing factor to all that we go through in life. If we are humbling ourselves and God is not exalting us, then our time has not yet come. Trust him. Wait on him, not on your circumstance, and cast all your anxiety on him. Why? Because he cares for you. Keep holding that door for the Lord. Keep doing the small things in his presence and with a joyful heart, and keep a pure heart. In an article that she wrote on trusting God even when life's not fair, Joyce Meyer admitted that she does this to help her hold on to her faith. She has this verse, 1 Peter 2:23, framed and hanging on her office wall. It's a verse that's talking about Jesus. And it says this, when he was reviled, and I might add, when he was unfairly reviled, he did not revile in return. And when he suffered, he did not threaten, but continued entrusting himself to him who judges justly. When life is unfair, you can hold on to that truth. You can hold on to your faith. You can trust God to be your vindicator, because he can pay us back for things that others have stolen from us. He can exalt us after taking down those who have oppressed us. He can glorify and exalt us after taking down those who have wronged us. He can give us much more than what was unfairly withheld from us. So don't ever say, I'm going to get even with them if it's the last thing I do. Wrap God's grace around your heart, and he will be the one to vindicate you. Keep holding on to your faith, even when life is unfair.